Greetings and good tidings, you good people. Welcome to Stone by Stone, an Edgewater Castle podcast, where we peel back the layers of the beautiful game like the 32-paneled onion that it is. Join me, Andrew Swanson, your host, as we engage in some insightful conversations with some very remarkable individuals. These brave souls will share their unique perspectives on the world and its game, their personal narratives, and how football has woven itself into the fabric of their lives like the thread in a highly personalized quilt. A heartfelt thank you to our production sponsors, Tightrope Recording, for their masterful sound engineering, and to our dedicated listeners. Your continued support means the absolute world to us, so thank you for it. Now, hear ye, gather round the hearth, pour something literally or figuratively warm into your cups, and welcome to Stone by Stone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stone by Stone. I am your host, Andrew Swanson, and I am very, very grateful to our guest this week, John Dorn, for being here. John, thank you so much for coming.
Great to be here, Andrew.
Thank you. So we've had a few conversations over the years, John, about a number of different things pertaining to the game of soccer, specifically in Chicago, the game of soccer in the U.S. and globally. You've had an enormous amount of experience in the game over the years, and you have what I think is just a fascinating career in general. So I can't wait to get into all the different compartmentalizations of your story over the course of the next hour. But for the sake of timeline and linear storytelling, why don't we start sort of at the beginning with your upbringing, where you're from, what was your sort of home life like as a kid, when did you find soccer? Start with those three.
Yeah, I'm Chicago City, born and bred, Southwest Side, and if you knew the Southwest Side back in the '80s, there wasn't much soccer, and I come from a fairly large extended family. Irish Catholic, South Side.
Mm-hmm. Which parish?
You got to say Tommy Moore.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
And that kind of leads right to the soccer part of the story. Where I grew up, everybody was Irish and mostly Catholic, and you lived in these 1 mile square grids that were defined by the parish you were from. And it just so happened that my grade school and our parish, there was a bit of a soccer buzz.
Huh.
Our neighbors at the corner were from Italy.
Mm-hmm.
We had some parents that were from Ireland and had done soccer. My family's very much in sports and music, typical city worker from down there. But I'm the shortest male in my family, so everybody was basketball, and it just wasn't cutting it.
Sure. I'm going to say this for our listeners who are not watching on YouTube. John is not the shortest person in most families. You're probably taller than I am. So you grew up in a very athletic household, basically.
Yeah, my dad was a Chicago detective, CPD, but he had started college before him and my mom got married for basketball, and he was going to be a teacher and a coach. He ended up becoming our local community college, Moraine Valley. He was a basketball coach for 25 years there.
Wow.
So I grew up around coaches. A couple of my uncles are basketball coaches. A number of my cousins have went into the profession. So there was a coaching gene. My mom was a school teacher, so the best coaches are teachers. That's what she would tell my dad.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So growing up in that environment, it was pretty natural to gravitate into sports. Soccer came along. Like I said, our neighborhood just happened to be very, some parents were really into soccer. Our neighbors that were from Italy, I was friends with their kids, and they went to Italy every summer, and they come back. And I'll never forget, you guys are way too young, but the 1982 World Cup.
Sure.
When Italy won it, we would go in their basement every day and watch TV on the Spanish station for the live broadcast from Spain.
Wow.
So that was a young age, but I also benefited by the fact that we lived a mile away from Marquette Park, which was a big Lithuanian stronghold. And, back in those days, and, we're going all the way back, club soccer at the youth level did not exist at any level like it does today, if at all. But the best players, and if you were involved with the game, you get involved with the ethnic clubs.
Yeah.
I lived a mile away from Marquette Park, and I just kind of started riding my bike over to the park and hanging out with those guys. And, today you think of the ethnic clubs with their men's teams, but back then it was pretty defined. There was a men's team, there was a U19 team, and there was a U15 team. And the youth, amateur, and first team. And if you're good enough on the U15, they put you on the U19, and then they might put you on the first team. And to me, I look back, even thinking about coming on the podcast, is organized and as directed as things are in today's world. Things were pretty damn well 40 years ago when I started playing.
Yeah.
Because if you were good enough, you played with the men.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot. And then as I got more into playing and meeting people from outside my neighborhood, the big Croatian club, Adria was down there.
Yep.
They actually had two clubs at them, Adria and Croatian.
We're very familiar with Adria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was another club that called themselves the Croatians, and even though I was in Croatian, they didn't hold that against me. If you're good enough to play, you
exactly.
played.
Meritocracy.
Yes, you played. So, my background began in that. And, people talk today about playing for their high school, their college, their club team. Growing up, it was very ethnically driven. Now, from there, of course, I played for schools. I played for my schools.
What school did you go to and play for, like high school?
Started at Quigley South and did Brother Rice, so Catholic schools.
Yep.
All the way through. College, I bounced around a bit. We won't get into the reasons why I bounced around a little bit. Let's put it this way.
I bounced around a little myself. You're in good company.
Let's put it this way. Division I was great, but I was certainly more interested in playing and getting into coaching than school.
Yeah.
And I was so ready to move into the coaching realm, and that'll lead to maybe part two.
Yeah.
I started coaching at 14.
Oh, wow. So we're still in part one when you started coaching, really.
Absolutely, and there is some overlap. And, in our neighborhood, none of our parents had played, except for our neighbors from Italy and a couple of dads from Ireland. So I started coaching, and in high school, my high school coaches always pushed me. A great influence at Quigley South was my counselor. He kept telling me, "You need to get through school so you can coach. Let's get you through school so you can coach." So I look back. Sometimes I think that my mentors were telling me that I was born to coach because they were sick of me on the field playing.
Sure.
But it just kind of came, and I look back on my coaches and mentors back in high school and college, and also in club at the same time. They pushed me that way. They would make me the captain of the team, and I was never the best player. I played, but they wanted me to be their coach on the field.
Right.
So eventually, as we talk about, 99% of the time your playing career ends before you really want it to end. I was okay with that, and I was okay with that because I had already started coaching. I coached a high school all-star team on the girls' side when I was 19.
Wow.
My freshman year of college. So I got in very, very early to it. When I finished and got my degree my last year at U of I, where I couldn't play soccer at a high level anymore because I didn't have a team. I ended up being like the player coach for the club team.
Yep.
And the women, the women, they called me over and they wanted me to coach them. So I was coaching 2 teams my senior year of college of my peers. So,
yeah.
So it was just natural to get right into coaching, and I was ready for it. Now, you go to school back then because you had to be a teacher because there wasn't enough full-time work either in club, and the pro game was indoor, so there wasn't a living to be made in that. So getting right into coaching, the assumption was that I was going to teach.
Right.
So I put my head down. I got my degree, psychology and kinesiology. So.
And was that from U of I?
Yeah, but I was only there for that end to get my degree.
Got it.
I basically was told by my mom and dad to buckle down and get that degree.
Yeah.
And forget about soccer for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I was down there coaching 2 teams, so they didn't know about that.
You're forgetting about soccer, spending 4 days out of the week on the field practicing.
Yeah. So come back, show, continue to play. This is the early 90s. There's no outdoor league, and I was not. My game was not an indoor. Indoor players all had pace. Could come. All the 8s and 11s.
Yeah.
And left backs and right backs. They could play indoor. Holding mids, 6s.
Yeah,
no.
Sure. Yeah.
So early to mid 90s, there was basically a dearth. There was no outdoor league. We were hoping that an outdoor league would come back, but it actually was. I look back on it; those were the best times because it pushed me right to where I needed to be in the game.
Yeah, and is that due to the fact that coaching became such a target for you in that moment, or was it that because there wasn't an outdoor league in that moment as a player, you sort of knew you weren't going to be an indoor player, so you were like, career shift got to happen full on now?
I would say it's both, but it was probably a lot more about getting right into the coaching.
Yeah.
I was just ready for it. Plus, I knew I was not even close to being
sure.
ready. But.
So when you graduated, did you go straight into teaching and coaching then? Was that like your next step, basically?
So that's a good story. I go back to Brother Rice,
Yeah.
And one of my mentors, the late Nick Marculin, who was a high school coaching legend in Chicago, he's like, "Yeah, we got to get you right into coaching." And one of my mentors back in my old neighborhood in St. Tommy Moore, Pat Berry, was his assistant coach at the time. He said, "Yeah, I got to get you on staff." I said, "Perfect. I'll teach, I'll coach." I talked to Mike Makovich, who I had known from playing club. He had just started what eventually became the Chicago Magic, but was called Sports Club at the time.
I'm glad they did the rebrand there. It's got a little more pizzazz to it.
Yeah, Sports Club was a
little generic, frankly.
But get you a couple of teams, put it together. So I'm putting my package together.
Yeah.
And all summer I'm working camps, as we all did back in the day. You're hustling up at IU camp at Michigan State. You're just bouncing around Northwestern. But every time I go over to Brother Rice, Coach Marculin would be like, yeah, it's okay. Well, I finally realized about August 1st that there was no teaching spot for me. So I asked what my salary was going to be for the season. And when he said $1,200, which meant that averaged about $100 a month.
Yeah, that's not a lot.
And then, that made the $5,000 I was making coaching club look like $1 million.
Yep. It's a nice way to think of it.
Yeah. I figured I have to find something.
Yeah.
And by the way, I skipped out on a part that after I graduated, I did go out to Cali. I went out to Southern California for a little bit.
Yeah.
I had a friend that was from college. He was an aspiring screenwriter.
Uh-huh.
So I figured I'd go and hang out in Laguna Beach with him.
Of course.
And get a coaching job. When that coaching job offered $1,000 a month and rent was $2,000 a month, I knew it was time to get back home.
Yeah, it's the math, isn't it? It's always the math.
Just didn't add up. So I'm back, and I really wanted to coach.
Yeah.
Teaching was going to be the secondary part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I hustled up a little bit. I had a relative that worked down. Part of our family worked down at the exchange at the Board of Trade.
Yep.
And he offered me a job, basically as a runner / clerk.
Mm-hmm.
But the best part of it was the hours fit for coaching. I was done at 1:30 every day. So I took that so I could coach,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually led into a 10 to 12 year career there that complemented while I was coaching.
Wow. So let's pause there and just talk about this part of your career quickly. You spent how many years at the Board of Trade?
I ended up trading for 11 years.
Okay. And you started as a runner. What is that to those of us who don't know much about this?
Well, now that the trading floors are closed,
Mhm.
it is the dinosaur world. You basically were a messenger for the traders in the pit.
Got it.
And my relatives worked in the pit, and I just started working them. I got lucky because in a short period of time the markets got busy, and they offered me a trading position. And what was funny is every year I was there, I would get an offer to teach back at the Catholic school.
Right.
And my
A day late and a dollar short.
yeah,
huh?
and my relative or my boss at the board would, well, we'll give you a little bit more to stay here. And to be honest, and I have to make full disclosure because my mom still believes I'm going to go back and be a teacher someday.
Yeah.
I'm 30 years out of school. I do renew my teaching certificate every year to
That's
keep
good.
her
That's
happy.
good. That's good. You
She
never
still-
know.
She still thinks I'm going to go back someday.
Yeah,
which
someday. Maybe.
but it was great because it allowed me to coach.
Yeah.
And it was great working there, but certainly coaching was where I was and wanted to be.
Yeah.
Those were interesting times, Andrew. Mid to late '90s. I was doing the club stuff. I moved on from the high school to the college up here on the north side at Loyola. It was a great time, and at the same time, club soccer was getting more serious here.
Yeah.
The Sockers who I had an affiliation with since they started in the late '80s. They were becoming a force in youth soccer. The Magic was here, and I was kind of half in, half out. I was working downtown, but I was I was happy enough doing my coaching. But an interesting thing happened. Some of my former players that had played for me in high school or club were all at college. They were at Yale, they were at Creighton, they were up in Madison, they were at IU, and they'd hit me up when they get back and they'd want to train. So we train in the summer. Did a little bit over Montrose Park. We did some on the south side. We just bounced around. And then we decided to start playing,
Yeah.
So we'd play in, we'd replace some of the men's teams that couldn't field teams in the summer in tournaments.
Yep.
And we did pretty well.
I would imagine you did.
And it was fun. We did it for a couple of summers. And then, like, out of the blue, I get a call from Peter Wilt. I knew Peter from before. A couple of my good friends who were good enough to play indoor were playing for the old Chicago Power, and he was the GM with them. So I was always hanging out with them, trying to find my way somewhere. And I always got as far up to the board, and then they wouldn't let me on the field.
Yeah,
but, Peter had a conversation with a guy whose kids I coached, who was a judge here in Chicago. The Sockers had run a USL2 team, which was called the PDL back then, for a couple of years after they dropped out of being the Stingers in the professional league. USL had called Peter and said, "We want to still have a team in Chicago. Why doesn't the Fire take it?" So Peter said, "Absolutely, we'll take it." Problem was back then that the rules, and as you know, running an amateur program, The rules back then were really stringent on the
NCAA players?
between the NCAA said no NCAA players can play with a team that has any affiliation, whether it's
Professionalism?
$1 or a name,
Wow.
with a professional team. So Peter had this hot potato. He had this team, but the Fire at that time couldn't organize it or run it. They could fund it, but they couldn't run it. So this guy, Mark Boyle, who was one of my mentors too, whose kids I coached, he knew Peter socially, and Peter said, "Why don't you become the owner of the team?" And Mark said, "I'd love to." He goes, "But I want John Dorn, who I've worked with, his kids, he coached my kids. I want him to run it for me." And Peter knew me and said, "All right, why not?" So I get this break when I'm 29 years old.
Yeah.
And, in life, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. I absolutely lucked into being able to work with the Fire beginning in 2001. And, when the Fire came here to Chicago, they were the first expansion team.
Yeah.
And it was in 98. And I just started trading. I'm in my 20s. I'm coaching college soccer. My first affiliation with the Fire was an absolute fan. 1998 was a great time for soccer in Chicago.
Yeah.
I went out to the final, to the Rose Bowl.
Wow.
Called Peter. He got me tickets. It was a memorable time.
Yeah.
And then 2.5 years later, to be offered a chance to run their first developmental team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It was really
That's
cool.
awesome.
It was really cool.
So were you coaching, what college were you coaching at while you were at the Board of Trade?
At Loyola.
You were the Loyola head coach?
No.
Assistant coach?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I work part-time. One of my other mentors, the late Ray O'Connell, he brought me in. The great thing about that job was because I had another job, he just wanted me to scout, recruit, help him like at trainings.
Yeah.
Just talk to him about players. And, that was, I look back, my most casual fun days as an adult was that time.
Yeah.
Worked out top 4 hours a day, took the red light up to Loyola, kind of did my thing.
Not bad.
By 5 o'clock, I'm back in the neighborhood. So those were good times.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what was the experience like with, this is a question I always ask people, but about like the ecosystem and how the soccer ecosystem has changed a lot, right, since you started in your parish and the Southwest side. So I'm curious about what that moment when the PDL was happening, you got the reins, like what did the national landscape look like sort of below MLS at that time? And then like what was the Chicago market like compared to when it was just the Lithuanians and Adria? Like what was going on in the lower leagues?
Yeah.
When you got bumped up a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And we'll go back a little bit. I mean, we're going on a timeline here, but we got to go back. And here's what's funny. Just today, sitting at the coffee shop getting ready for this, I went through some old stuff, and I happened upon Tribune Sports June 93. And I was looking for, I knew that was an interesting time because I remember I had just finished college.
Yeah.
That was the summer I was back.
Yeah.
And
you're about to go teach your brother Rice.
Well, I thought I was, but that summer, something happens a year later in '94.
Yes,
the
of
World
course,
Cup.
Yes.
But that summer before, there was preparation for the World Cup, and we hosted at Soldier Field, U.S. Germany, the week after the U.S. had beat England in New York, with basically the '94 rosters. And it was funny. I found the article today. It was from June '93 in the Trib, and it was previewing the U.S.-Germany game after we had beat England in New York. And basically the crux of the article was, well, that was great, but, and by the way, the article was like on page 8 of the sports section.
Yeah, of course.
And actually today, that was just kind of an epiphany that's where we were 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The World Cup is coming in 12 months, and we're playing Germany with the players that were going to play for Germany the following year in our national. I mean, we're playing. It was a legit friendly.
Yeah.
And, it's on page 8 of the sports section. Now, I remember going to the game. It was 1-1. We played great, and it was filled. But there were 40,000 German fans there.
Yeah.
But I did realize right then that maybe something was happening. And, the next year when we had the World Cup, the buzz was great. There were 5 games here in Chicago. We all helped out.
Mm-hmm.
I helped out. Everyone in soccer helped out as a volunteer. Now, up until that point, the Metro League, National League was where it was at. But then people started realizing, well, State Cup means something.
Yeah.
Regionals mean something. McGuire Cup at U19 means something. And it really started to feed on itself. But what everyone forgets, and thank God the powers that be in soccer did it back then. I mean, we were the first country that was awarded a World Cup with no professional league, which if you think about today is it was unheard of at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But FIFA did say you have to have a professional league within 2 years. And, if you want a fascinating story, go back and read the books about what happened because, we'll have the league, we'll get it going. Remember the federation got a cash infusion because of hosting.
Yep.
But what happened between the end of the World Cup and MLS picking up in '96 is a fascinating story. Too long to tell here, and I only know peripherally from what I read.
Yeah, we'll have you back on for a special.
I mean, the fact the league got off the ground is amazing.
Yeah,
and and we don't have to rehash that. At a certain point in time, the league actually contracted, and we had 3 owners in the whole league,
right?
Who basically saved pro soccer in the U.S. But it was different. We had a now in Chicago. It's interesting. 96 when the league started to 98 when we came in with the Fire, being the first expansion team. That was a real downer. Those were bad times.
Yeah.
Because the cynics here in Chicago. Now look, I'm in my 20s. I look through rose-colored glasses. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. But the cynics in Chicago are like, well, that we didn't get a franchise because we don't deserve it. Chicago soccer is too fractured. We have to show we're going to get a franchise, and the league did say that.
Yeah.
And credit to Peter and Mr. Anschutz, for pushing and becoming the first expansion franchise. But I'll tell you what, 98 was magical because we had pro soccer.
And like amazing players.
Oh,
like
you couldn't build an MLS roster. I mean, Miami can do what they want with Messi and company, but the fact that roster those first couple of years was built by us, not with just buying players.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think about that a lot when I think about the and there have been like the Schweinsteigers and so on. Like there've been big players that have come, but when I think about the fact that like Stoichkov was a Chicago player in a year that they would have cut. It's just the coolest. Like
you got to think about this. At a certain point in time, you had Peter Nowak, Lubos Kubek, and Hristo. The 3 most iconic players in each of their home countries. Here in Chicago at the same time. And we didn't realize it because Hristo's from Bulgaria, Lubos, but Peter. Look, Peter, when they talk about in other sports, a player coming in and making a franchise, we've had 2 of those in the history of the Fire. Peter at the outset for the Polish population, and then of course Blanco. Blanco was transformative 10 years later with the Mexican population. So the buzz of that first year, and you couldn't have wrote the story any better. And we still live it today through Frankie.
Mm-hmm.
You win the championship, you come back a week, which in the new calendar would never happen. You come back a week later after winning the cup at the Rose Bowl to play for the U.S. for the Open Cup Championship in Soldier Field on a Friday night.
And you've already got
30,000.
the MLS Cup, right?
Yeah, and you've already got the MLS Cup. And then the hometown boy scores the goal. By the way, as a personal friend of Frankie, I could say he had a bad season that year, but he finished it on a
He made up
big
for it.
note. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Frankie.
Hey, Frank, by the way, come on the pod. We'd love to have you, hear it from your perspective.
Well, he'll come on down to refute that.
Yeah,
so.
you will. Thank God. You really just planted a seed for him to come on now. I appreciate that. So we're with the Chicago Fire. This is the first time I've addressed my lines, so I hope you're impressed with that. So when it comes to like the growth of the game in Chicago, the Fire in Chicago over the last, since they've started, basically are kind of synonymous in that MLS is always the top of the pyramid, always sort of running the show in a lot of ways, right? How have you seen like the soccer culture and ecosystem, to use that word again, evolve as the Fire has evolved and changed, right? Because there's obviously been periods of time when they were in Bridgeview, they've now come back. The shifts that have happened have been many over the last few years. So like, talk to me a little bit about where you've seen things grow sort of since, let's say, since the Blanco era, for example, right? Like how have things changed for the Fire to you, and where do you see things going now that so much change has happened?
Right. There's that can be answered on so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
Where the league is at.
Yeah.
And I've done some work over the last few years with the league, but seeing where the leagues develop, seeing where the first teams have developed,
Mm-hmm.
and then certainly the third part is what where I'm at,
Mm-hmm.
and my seed is planted in the developmental system. So I'll just quick talk about all three.
Yeah.
The first two are easy because I don't have a lot of experience in those two. Look, at the league level, it is amazing to me, from remembering the old days to going to the league office, and then to today, from the league office being a small operation, basically looking like a glorified, when you go to league office, it'll look like a glorified, youth league set up with, and now with
Some filing cabinets and a fax machine.
Yep. And now with 400 people in that office, taking 3 floors up in Midtown Manhattan. But, that's the physical part of it.
Yeah.
But the whole idea, look, Don Garber's done a fantastic job making, this league could have been out of business 4 years after it started.
Yeah.
It started in '96, and we had a retraction 4 years later. I remember 2001. 2001 was the first year that I worked for the Fire.
Mm-hmm.
That was our first season with the PDL, and is the league gonna exist? Maybe we're gonna be the only team in Chicago playing PDL in a year or two. So to go from that, 3 owners covering 10 teams, our owner covering half the league, to seeing where the league's at now, where every team has its own owner, the net worth, that's probably the biggest thing. I hate to say money, but money talks. And the capitalization of the owners in our league, you have very wealthy, passionate football fan that are buying teams.
Yeah.
And certainly in Chicago, there's no exception.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Anschutz was a fantastic owner. I worked for Andrew, and Andrew always had the best intentions as an owner. But having Joe, who's local and committed, and
what a lot of people have been accused of is like a fear to actually spend the money to try to succeed. Joe is willing to do that, and
Absolutely.
I think that's definitely worth applauding too, because you can very easily invest in something as like a longer term moneymaker for yourself, but to also say, no, we want to win games, we want to be important, we want to build a state of the art facility. Yeah, that's all very real.
And I'll kind of close on this and that's at the league level, that's what's changed, and it's changed absolutely for the better. And I really got a wake up call a couple of years ago when I was in a conversation in a meeting, and they were talking about owners. And, for me, being, a close to MLS original, it was Mr. Anschutz and Lamar Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And when they said, his Lamar's sons, who now, own Dallas and only own Dallas because they've sold Kansas City and Columbus, when they said, the Hunts are, mid-level worth among, they kind of meet in the middle. And I thought to myself, the grandsons of the biggest oil wildcatter in the world and the sons of Lamar Hunt, who, by the way, also own the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're mid-level in the league. That's pretty good for the league.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's a pretty high
Yeah.
high ceiling, one would imagine.
So as far as the league itself, I mean, when I started, the league had 12 teams.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have 30 this year. And there's been some pushback on the idea that, we've expanded too fast. The talent pool hasn't stayed in pace with that. And we can talk about that when we get to the development side. But the league itself, I mean, my God, every time a team builds a stadium, every time an expansion team comes in, it's a whole new market.
Yeah.
Passionate, like, all right, Nashville's great. Now St. Louis is better. Now San Diego is going to be, the fact that every time a new club comes in, that there's a fan base, a stadium, an owner that's capitalized. I mean, it's amazing. Now, within the league, can you make changes personnel-wise? Can you make changes into how we set the league up? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, we're working toward that. I'm not sure the international model is going to work, but let's look and see.
Yeah.
We're so different, geographically, fundamentally, you have, I think the last study I saw, you can consider that there's 12 different weather zones that teams play in, which clearly don't have in Europe anywhere.
Yeah.
So, but that's the great thing about the league. The league's always willing to figure out what to do next. We've never been stagnant in that.
Yeah.
And then a final piece in development. My God, 24 years ago in 2001, we started developmental, which was more a research team for the Fire. Our academy system, fully funded, started, 15 years ago. Well, no, time's flying. 17 years ago. We started with 2 teams in one field, and look at where it's at now.
Yeah.
And the number of players, the number of players that have come through, the number of players that have not come through, but have succeeded. College soccer's changed.
Yeah.
Club has changed. Academies have changed that. But, I watch players today, and when we started the academy in 2007, the most important thing we wanted to do was to teach players to be comfortable on the ball. I mean, that you have to start somewhere. And I feel so old now because when a young, new coach will come and talk to me, and the first thing I'll say is, you just have to make the player feel comfortable. No, I can't say that anymore because they are comfortable. We've
instilled that in the whole culture, kind of.
We've already developed that because of the way the way that we coach and develop down to it. You don't need to train them in that way. They're already comfortable on the ball. So something as simple as that. We're at different levels now. With the league going from 12 to 30, and USL increasing by leaps and bounds. The idea of what a professional player is today is a little different than it was 20 years ago.
It's a wider spectrum, right?
It's a wider spectrum, and I do believe, and people like me are to blame, we need to be so cognizant of developing players, because we need to, we are developing more players than we did 20 years ago,
Sure.
but it's from here to here, and we need the space for this many professional players.
Yeah.
And, when you hear about, well, how is the U.S. going to catch up? How are we going to do that? I believe it's in that. We're providing the opportunity through owners, through MLS, through a great system of USL also having a second and third division, from MLS having Next Pro, from a very well-organized academy system now. So the pieces are in place.
Yeah.
When club coaches and I would sit at tournaments 20 years ago and we talk about what we need to do and what we need, we've been provided those opportunities now. So it's incumbent on us to push that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we could have a whole nother show and discussion about, what that is. The idea of being comfortable on ball. We're doing that at 8 through 10.
Yeah.
Okay. I do believe at some level that we can grassroots this out more.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't think we need an academy. The first team, I'll go all the way back to what we were talking about when I started playing.
Yeah.
When you go to the Lists or you go to Adria or you go to Eagles, they'd have a U15 team.
Yeah.
That's when they wanted you.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe, and I am in the minority, that at some level in the academy system, let grassroots build that.
Yeah.
And bring those players in when they get to be 14 or 15.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really fascinating thing to think about how much the academy system and lower division pro leagues growing sort of just makes the ground, creates more square footage basically for potential talent to grow out of, right? Like you're saying, expand the filter to have more people come through it, basically, right?
Exactly.
I agree with you. I think a lot of the things that are really interesting to me about some European cultures in the way, and South America and other parts of the country, where their player development is basically like almost at the beginning like a public service. It's just there for every kid to get into the filter and see where they end up, right? It's a very brief story, but one of our former players, Gustav Eriksson, who played at North Park University, very good player from Sweden. He was an academy kid at Brommapolkana, which is in Stockholm, I think. And their whole system is basically that every public school has a club team from that first or second division pro team. And there are like 60 of them around Stockholm. So like every public school has a version of this club, and then they all play each other, and then the really good kids get brought to the academy team, and then that team goes to play like Real Madrid. But it's like basically a way to have the front of the filter be enormous, and the way it all sort of siphons out is that the super good players are going to be very, very good.
Exactly.
Because you're seeing all the kids.
Right. And that's my belief too. Look, we have the platforms. And we have the investment now. Now it's incumbent on us to do the right job in development.
Yep, absolutely. We're cruising right through this thing. I didn't put, I'm going to be totally honest, I didn't put my airplane mode on, and I'm doing that now. So that's the buzzing you may have heard. Cool. So we are going to take a pretty quick break in a second, just so we can potentially stretch our legs and drink some water. In terms of the Fire now versus when they first started and that year you were a fan and going to the Rose Bowl and everything, what's the new ceiling you want to see them achieve? I mean, obviously you want to see them win again and stuff like that, but like, what do you think would allow the Fire to have the biggest impact on the city and on like soccer in the city in terms of what you want to see them achieve or do?
To me, it hasn't. On the field's one thing,
sure, and
I think the pieces are in place. I mean, Greg is an incredible hire.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're blessed that he was right in town here and wanted, and he wanted a project. Yeah. So
just doesn't want to have his mail sent somewhere else. He's like, this is where my mail comes already. Why do I?
Yeah. So I think that's going to take care of itself. On that side of things. I always, and I know we'll probably talk more about it in the second part. In when I got into a soccer management position, I really learned a lot about corporate life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say corporate life, it's not corporate because you're on the field, but the most successful corporate people I know always said, I hire the right people around me.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's the same thing in coaching. It's the same thing in a development system. If you hire the right people, it's going to feed on itself. Greg is certainly a great leader. He's been a great leader in every job he's had in soccer. And he's doing that. So you hire the right people, but as far as the impact, like overall on the community, to me, I haven't worked at the Fire in 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's grown. The club continues. The league, everything around it continues to grow by leaps and bounds. But one thing hasn't changed. We're the professional club in Chicago. We're the professional club in the market.
Mm-hmm.
We need to act like the professional club.
Yeah.
And whether it comes to working with the local community-based club on or off the field, everyone from the top on down needs to remember that. We are the professional club.
Mm-hmm.
Let's act like professionals.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we're better, not that we're more important, not that we're MLS and you're playing in the IYSA Premier Division. It's important that there's a community element to everything in professional sports. And, and in my experience is 99% in this game, but the little bit I've had outside of it, the best clubs in any sport understand their relationship to the community, because we don't exist without community.
Yeah.
I make fun of my friends who I think are absolute sport nuts, but I also thank them and buy them a drink because we're in business and we work because they absolutely, live and breathe their club.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. Remember, you have to be the leader in the community.
Yeah.
And especially in the sport that you are in.
Yeah. It's like the Spider-Man phrase, like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
That sort of feels like the lesson there. I think that's a great place to take a brief break here. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back with John Dorn after this very, very slight break. Thank you for listening so far, and enjoy your brief reprise from my voice. See you in just a moment. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Andrew Swanson, your host here, joined by Mr. John Dorn. Welcome back. Thank you so much again for being here. So we have covered a pretty extensive amount of your career so far. Growing up on the Southwest side, getting involved in the Board of Trade while coaching college soccer. It's been quite a journey. We've talked about your involvement in the Chicago Fire and their development. And now we're going to go more into your professional/personal life and how that has intersected a bit more publicly lately. You are a gay man.
Yes.
You came out when and what year?
Well, I've been out personally and with family and friends, but I came out professionally in early 2022.
Okay, cool. And how has that impacted your outlook on soccer and on sports in any way? Has it had any impact other than sort of the, obvious things of, people's reaction to that? But you personally, how has your sort of like engagement with the sporting world changed in any way?
It's only changed in the essence that I'm out and I'm living, as people say, your true life throughout.
Mm-hmm.
The reaction to my peers in the in the football community, amazing.
Yeah.
Made me actually say to myself, why didn't I do this 10 years ago?
Yeah.
So, I can't say anything other than great positive vibes out of it. The community's been great. We just talked for a long time about soccer, and most of my conversations with peers continue to be that.
Yeah. I will notice it didn't come up once. There was no reason for it
you
to,
know,
right?
and that's good, you
Mhm.
know, and that's, you know, that's normalized. You know, I was just at a friend's wedding, one of my best friends from all the way back to Southside High School.
Uh-huh.
He actually was good enough to play for Peter on the Power. So,
Oh, wow.
but he got married over the weekend, and we got together, and you know, the end of the night, you know, they were starting to give me some crap about, you know, one of the great things in life is when you go see your friends that you grew up with, no matter what you do, they just knock you right back down to size.
Yeah,
Like,
of
they know
course.
who you are.
Keep you humble.
But there was something, and I'm just saying this for purpose of anecdote. Outsports had done a top 100 you know, LGBT people in sports in the U.S., and I made the list, and I was number 72, and the comment was, "You've never been the 72nd best person in anything you've ever done in your life," which kind of goes to the point that not enough people are out in sport.
Yeah.
If I'm the 72nd most important person, there's an awful lot of people that are not out. And, you know, I just hope through, you know, my coming out that it makes, you know, and I tell my story whenever I have the opportunity, that it's fantastic, and you don't have to feel like you have to stay in the closet when you're working in particularly male sports. You know,
Yeah.
obviously, in women's sports, it's normalized, it's comfortable. I want people to realize how comfortable it can be, and I'm in an interesting place. You know, I didn't come out when I was playing. I didn't come out most of the time when I was coaching. So, you know, I always feel over the last 3 years that, you know, my role is evolving, but it's, you know, it's really two-pronged. It's one, to let my peers know that, you know, that are in my profession, that, you know, you probably have a player or two in your academy,
Yeah.
or on your next pro, or on your USL championship, or even, you know, an MLS team. And just make sure the locker room feels comfortable enough so they can come out.
Yeah.
And that's my role with my peers. And of course, I'm always here for players or ex-players. You know, one of my ex-players, Grant Stoneman, plays for Rhode Island right now. He played at Loyola. He's a Chicago kid.
Hell of a player.
Yeah. You know, his teammate out of San Diego when he was playing for Loyola for Landon was Colin Martin, who currently is the only out player in professional soccer right now in the U.S. But you know, through Grant, Colin and I got to know each other, and you know, when I came out, I didn't realize it. By the way, I came out and I was telling everybody, and I have to tell an anecdote. You know, when I decided to come out beyond my small group that knew in soccer, you know, we'd have a trip to Detroit. So I'd have a drink and dinner with my friends in Detroit. And I was every time we had an away game to Kansas City, you know, New York, I'm having this conversation. I just got so sick of having the same convo.
Yeah, you just got to put out a press release and get it over with.
Well, it was funny. Jim Budzinski from Outsports, and I say this to anyone that's listening: if you are in sport, if you're thinking about coming out, if you're in the closet, Outsports is absolutely, you know, they're a great forum, but the people that work there and the people that are part of Outsports are I always call Jim my gay sport whisperer.
Oh, nice.
They're great people, and you know, and I called Jim up and I said, you know, I'm sick of like doing this every time I go on a road trip. He said, well, that means you need to do a story. Then, like to your point, it wasn't a press release, but he said, you know, just do a story, and that's how I did my story, and it was a story almost, you know, today I would say, well, it's so I can help others.
Yeah.
It was almost just to be like, okay, it's out there.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm always there for players.
Yeah.
I'm always there, you know, and, you know, when I've had conversation with Colin, you know, we shouldn't be the only ones.
Yeah.
And when the story came out, and then I got a call from the DEI people at MLS, and they're like, you know, you're the first person on the technical side. You know, people in front offices are out, but you're the first person on the technical side that's come out that's worked with an MLS team. And I'm like, well, I didn't mean to be the first.
Yeah.
But I sure as hell shouldn't be the last.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really, you know, if I have a mantra moving forward, that's what I'd like to make sure others realize.
Yeah.
It's and you know what? I think of all the team sports in the U.S. right now, the culture of soccer / football is the best of any of the team sports.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Most inclusive, most open. And a lot has to do with the fan base too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know, you know, it's such an interesting thing, because I think we always think of sports, especially like male, like, you know, physical macho cultures that a lot of soccer comes from, right? But in America, in the US, we have the ability to sort of create our own destiny in terms of how we define the sport, right? And I think it's such a credit to you for not only like knowing yourself so well and being willing to have the bravery to do this. And I know you've probably heard people say this to you so much, and you're probably sick of this response too, but I think it is so incredible and so important to people to have examples, right? Like, for example, when you came out, you were the first one, apparently, right? And perhaps if there had been, you know, someone who was one of those first 3 owners of MLS that, you know, had come out before you, maybe it would have happened earlier and you wouldn't have spent less time kind of prior to that. Not that there's a bad time or a good time, but I think it's really, really important to have examples for people who may feel like they can't express themselves or be who they are because there aren't any mentors, right?
Right.
So I just think it's such a credit to you for being
Thanks.
a mentor and wanting to be vocal about this. How have you seen sort of like progress in the league? I know you've worked with MLS in this area before. Like you said, women's soccer and NWSL is sort of very, very forward in this world also. How have you seen progress made, you know, within the league? Obviously, we don't want to get too deep into, you know, the political landscape of the world right now in the United States, but how have you seen the league progress, and what kind of policies or things have they put in place to sort of make improvements on that level of comfortability for either employees or players or whomever?
Right. No, that's a really good question. You don't want to dive too deep into the rabbit hole.
Sure.
But that said, the league, I think all the, first of all, to think of having a pride night.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go back 20 years. When I was in my early, when I was living for Gen Xers, what Gen Zers are living now, living that life in Chicago. To think of a pride night at a sporting event,
yeah,
it just didn't happen 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now not only are they the norm, there's too many of them because my friends want to. Now I got to go to this event or that event or that event. No. So just like starting there.
Yeah.
The fact that sports has accepted, has not just accepted. Look, you made your point about the macho culture in the locker rooms, and there's a lot of things we're talking about here that we could do a whole.
It sure is, yeah.
A
Season
whole
2, the John Dorn special.
Yeah, a whole podcast on, but as we realize that there's normalized relationships across the board,
mm-hmm.
The teams have done a good job of putting out to the public.
Yeah.
Now I'm not going into a rabbit hole of politics here, but I'm going to the rabbit hole of where LGBT
mm-hmm.
male athletes are at these days. Teams have done a great job. Leagues have done a great job of including my community in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it each year, and it gets better each year, and it gets much more mainstream every year.
Yeah.
Every year it just becomes, and honestly, that's where you want it to be. Locker rooms still have some issues.
Yeah.
And I give MLS an awful lot of credit, and USL, of building education,
Mm-hmm.
building programming to address it. Could there be more? Absolutely. For someone like me, yeah, that's a passion. I think, but it's a start. And I think it's really important, not to my own horn, but people like me need to be the delivering that message.
Yeah.
If we deliver that message, and for me, it's more about not the people, the players I'm talking to at the moment. It's about my peers.
Mm-hmm.
Because my peers need to realize what is going on with the players.
Yep.
And, I'm not going to judge or set examples or precedents for straight people. That's why they need people like me. And that's why I wish more of us would be out in my peer group,
Mm-hmm.
because that'll make it easier to spread that message. But the leagues and the teams, absolutely make my community feel great. Now, there's people in my community, just like there are people in the straight community, that don't even care about going to a pride night.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
because they don't want to go to the sporting event. I myself am not a big sports fan.
Yeah.
I spend enough time on the field.
Right.
But it's just good. It's good for the community. It makes people in the community realize that people in sports do care,
Mm-hmm.
and that's important. If we continue to move that message along,
Yep.
that's important. Now, like I said, there's a big line though with how teams and leagues treat our community versus what goes on in the locker room.
Yeah.
But that's the next step, and that's
Yes,
the next
of course.
part.
And that's a wider cultural issue in many cases, right? Beyond just how clubs and teams and leagues can create policies and create ways to make sure that people at least know they are welcome and are comfortable. Right?
Exactly.
Totally. Cool. Well, we are going to move into a new section of my sheet here. This is a section we call bonus questions, which is basically not quite to our last section, which is rapid fire questions, which are what they sound like. These bonus questions, I guess you can take a little more time thinking about. So you are currently the running another team down south in Illinois. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience so far with Peoria and how last season went and what you're looking forward to this season?
Peoria City's been a really interesting project in my life. When I left the Fire, I continued to run a USL 2 team here in Chicago. We affiliated with FC United on the North Shore, which is one. They're an academy club. They're the biggest club in the North Shore. And it was great. And we continued to run that program. So I'm setting a little history here. We continued to run that program like we ran the Fire. We'd find the best college players from Chicago and surrounding areas. And we had an awful lot of success on the field. Mm-hmm. For me, it was kind of a personal project, too, because for many years, people said, well, you had success in attracting players and getting results because you were the Fire. You had the Fire name. So, in my 40s, I wanted to prove something where I can run something.
Yeah.
And we did, and we had a lot of success. And I had a lot of help getting it done. I will always thank Chad up at FC United and David Roth up there, who were always huge supporters of what we were doing. But at a certain point in time, you have to look at it from the business side. Mm-hmm. Unless you have an angel every year that shows up and, as you know, running a club. Mm-hmm. And there just wasn't a sustainable business model to it. And unfortunately, we had to, cease operations. But while I was doing that, right before COVID, my old agent, who was based out of Toronto and owned a USL2 team that had some success in the suburban areas of Toronto and Kitchener and Waterloo, called me and he said, I've been told by the Canadian Federation, all of us that play in USL2 and USL1 need to transition out of USL because at that time the Canadian Premier League was starting.
Right.
So he said, I'll give you equity. I'll make you an owner. You just got to find a place for me to move this team in the Midwest somewhere. And then you have to run it, obviously, because I'm in Canada. So I contacted one of my old players, Tim Regan, and who was an assistant coach at Bradley at the time.
Yep.
And his boss, Jim DeRose, who was head coach at Bradley at the time. And we went down there. Barry, my old agent, came down from Toronto. We went down to Peoria, and they were very excited about running it. And something just felt right.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember driving back to Chicago, and I said, "This actually feels like a business model."
Mm-hmm.
It's a community that clearly was very sports minded. We would be the biggest fish in that pond.
Yeah.
It felt so much different than running programs here in Chicago.
Yeah.
So we worked on it. We had an angel for the first season, a wealthy person from Peoria that was committed to community projects. So he helped us get, he gave us the initial funding for the program, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a season. And then 2021, everyone was getting ready to come back and play, and Peoria County, this is a funny story, they had the highest COVID rate in the spring of 2021 next to Detroit, which was having a big outbreak.
Yeah.
So they were the only county in Illinois that was still shut down. So we weren't able to have a season. And I wasn't sure if this thing would ever get off the ground.
Right.
But to a huge credit to Jim DeRose down there in Peoria, he kept the flame going. And we started playing 2022, and we made the playoffs our first year. We put a good enough project on the field, but the key was to build a business model.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, other than running an academy budget for my owner, I had to run a business model.
Yeah.
And what fun it's been.
Yeah.
And we've combined, I took my old GM role with Jim and put some rosters together that have been pretty good. Mm-hmm. We made the national final last year. 128 teams.
You hosted that game too.
We
right?
hosted. We hosted. We had 3,000 people there, a full house. But overseeing the whole operation. I don't work down there every day. Mm-hmm. Jim and our COO, Bobby Parker, are two full-time employees, which for USL2 is about normal. Mm-hmm. But it's been incredible. I have to pay attention to not just what's happening on the field.
Yeah.
In life, you say you learn something new every day. I am on a personal level, I'm just gratified by the project because it's gotten me to different place in soccer in my professional career. And on a professional level, it's great to see that there's, that there's a market for what we do. Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw a little plug in for what you guys do. I never have believed that amateur soccer can work in the city, but I do believe with the setup you have in Edgewater, and it reminds me a lot of Peoria, mm-hmm. right in the heart of a city.
Yeah.
You found Edgewater. It took me 20 years to find a place, but you guys have done that. So big kudos for that.
Thank you. That means a lot, and congratulations on making the final last year. I hope you have all the luck and just a bit more this year.
We're gonna try.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our rapid fire questions. Okay. What are you most passionate about outside of soccer?
Well, I'm pretty geeky, so
cool.
I love I love just being very curious.
Mm-hmm.
I try golf. It's too frustrating. I have to be involved with a sport that I can do well in.
Yes,
So
yes.
and if I'm not, I'm like the worst
Yeah.
sports. So
Mm-hmm.
I do enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah.
But not like hiking and
Rock climbing is really your thing.
I try and be active. For me, outside of soccer, just having an active lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
and being like really comfortable with,
Yeah.
with other people. Yeah.
Beautiful. Who is a leader or mentor you would immediately seek advice from in a difficult situation?
Ooh. Right away, that would be Hank Steinbrecher, who unfortunately I don't have regular access to because he moved out to Arizona. Hank was he ran U.S. Soccer. He's one of the key people that brought the World Cup here in 1994. Hank might be the smartest on and off the field guy I ever met. Nice. And he is just an incredible personality. He walks in a room and he just puts energy into the room. Mm-hmm. Not by trying to be the most important person in the room. He's absolutely the smartest person I've ever met in soccer. Now, beyond Hank, who I don't have regular access to anymore because he moved to Arizona, that's interesting. I go to people that I grew up with.
Yeah.
They'll give, for me, I go to people I grew up with, people I respect in the game who may not be big names. I just want someone to give me an honest answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's different people for different things, but
totally.
But I think your go-to people always have to be people that will give you their unvarnished.
Shoot it straight.
Yep.
Absolutely. Who's a player, past or present, that you would avoid going back in time to play against?
Oh, Taylor Twellman, that little prick.
That's amazing.
Listen, he drove all of us at the fire crazy for years.
Yeah.
And then we finally beat him that one year in the playoffs.
Nice.
But Taylor, when you talk about being a pro,
mm-hmm.
that was Taylor just fought his way.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing about that. Taylor Twellman is the foil, but most foils that I had through the years, I co-opted it. I get him on my team then.
Nice.
You're the guy I hated to play against. I want you with me.
Yeah,
and I want you on my team.
It's very Abraham Lincoln of you. Who is the one player you would choose to go back in time to watch live?
Oh, wow. I'm going to go back to that other question, though.
Yeah.
I just realized something. I got that attitude about co-opting because I read Team of Rivals.
From Abraham Lincoln. That's why I brought it up.
So that's a great leadership book for coaches.
Yeah. Everyone check out Team of Rivals. Yeah. You'll get what we're talking about here.
There's my geeky side coming
out. There we go. Yeah, we have a lot of similarities in what we're geeky about.
So what was that question again?
This one is, who is one player you would choose to go back in time to watch live?
Oh, Pele.
Great answer. What city would you choose to move to?
Hold on, though. There's a second one.
Who's the second one?
I'd want to go back and see Sir Alex Ferguson play.
Oh.
Because he wasn't the greatest player,
yeah.
but he was a bastard goalkeeper. And because the best coach, the best manager in history, as a player, what pushed it?
Yeah.
Because I was like him. I wasn't the best player.
Sure.
And he became the best manager in history.
That's an excellent answer. So, you just want to see what he's like as a player.
I wanted to see what he was like as a player.
That's a great answer.
And all you can find are grainy, old Scottish League stuff when he was at Aberdeen.
Yeah. Before coaching them to Champions League victory.
That's right.
Player. So, what city would you move to just to watch soccer games?
Oh, I'd go north of London, Luton. Now, hold on. I don't like watching.
Sure.
But I go north of London, Luton, because up there I could go see my Rushden Diamonds, which is my favorite. You could get down to London. A lot of those small Edgewater Castle type clubs are
up there.
Yeah, I go just north of London because I'd still want the social life of London. Of course,
yeah. I mean, London is sort of the obvious answer to some people, but I'm glad you specified Luton.
No,
I
want to go a little north because that little area up.
Yeah, it's like the Edgewater of London. That's a great answer. who are the top 3 most impressive players that you've been a part of training or you've sort of had a part of their development?
That I developed or I knew like playing.
Yeah, like you maybe saw play as a kid or you developed yourself at the Fire or elsewhere. Like just 3 really talented
all right,
players.
I'm going to give three guys, all different.
Mm-hmm.
Frank Lopez, growing up.
Yep.
He's a couple years older than me. There wasn't a player in Chicago that could hold a candle to him.
Yeah.
A legend.
Yeah.
Like he played at Mather High School.
Yeah.
No one knew what Mather was.
Yeah. Over on Peterson?
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah.
Up there somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah, he was amazing as a kid. He was a couple years older than me, and then he signs with the Sting.
Yeah.
We're in high school, and he's playing. He's still in high school playing with them. Brian McBride's a little younger than me.
Yeah.
But he always played up, so I knew him from playing. And just a fantastic human being and friend.
Yeah.
But Brian wasn't always. Brian was always the best player because he had the nose for the goal.
Yeah.
And he never stopped working.
Mm-hmm.
Most guys in his position don't work hard.
Yeah.
Brian was the hardest working number 9 I ever met. Third, that's easy. Brad Guzan.
Oh.
Of all the players I had through the years, Brad was just this freakish athlete.
Yeah.
That probably should have played another sport.
Probably should have been a linebacker.
Brad could have played. I mean, I'll never forget, we were on a trip one time and we started playing basketball. There was a little gym by the locker room, and he's beating the crap out of us playing basketball. My favorite Brad story is now when I had him, he was playing for a friend of our family's at a small Catholic high school down in the south suburbs. And I went to watch a playoff game, and of course he was a goalkeeper, and they got to PKs, and he wasn't a goalkeeper. He was playing forward. He scored 2 goals, but they gave up 2 goals, and they got to PKs, and he went back in the goal for the PKs.
No way.
And they went to the state final.
That's cool.
But that was Brad. Brad would do, and when people ask about like what does it take to be a pro?
Yeah.
It's just little things like that. There's the hunger and the drive to do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
That's what made him what he is. And when people ask, are you shocked he's still playing at 40? Because come on, man. Of course you're shocked anybody can still play for. Of course the position allows
Lends
it
itself.
in today's world. But I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
If anybody was going to play at 40, it was going to be Brad. He's a goalkeeper, and you know what? One of the most down-to-earth, fantastic human beings you'll ever meet.
We'd love to have him on the pod. We'd absolutely love to have him on the podcast. Brad
would do, and Brad will do anything for the people in Chicago.
Man,
Southsiders, we take care of each other.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Okay, what message do you have for young players in Chicago who dream of playing professionally? You sort of alluded to it just there, but
go right back to that. Look, everyone says they want to. I'm playing soccer. I want to be a pro. You work in business. I want to be a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
I work in the financial world. I want to, make $1 million. I mean, if you don't have ambition, don't do it.
Yeah.
But the whole idea, why want to be a pro? Well, you know what? You have to not think about that. You just have to think about being hungry, driven. We used to say, Larry Sunderland and I used to run the academy together. We used to say, we need players that have PhDs, poor, hungry, driven. You don't have to be poor anymore, but you absolutely have to be hungry and driven.
Yeah.
And you can't think about it, and you can't keep saying it. Actions are more important than words. But you also have to realize that we all have ceilings. My ceiling is a coach. My ceiling is a technical person. My ceiling is a player. We all have levels of that. And as you begin to realize what your ceiling is, you have to be realistic about where you're at too.
Yeah.
We all say we want to be a pro. If you don't, you don't have the ambition. But damn, you have to be hungry and driven. You just got to grind it every day.
Yep.
And it's you can read these motivational books. 10,000. Literally 10,000 hours means something though.
Yeah.
You don't think about it. You're not keeping track on your watch. But yeah, you just be hungry and driven, and don't think about it. Just grind it every day.
Yeah, great answer. Let's do this. What is one main prediction you have for the future of soccer in the United States?
I think after the World Cup, you are going to see. Look, I hate going back to money, but MLS started. We sustained a national team for a generation on what the '94 World Cup did. You take what happened 30 years ago, and when you say exponential, something's going to happen exponentially after this. When people ask me about the World Cup and the important one, we were looking for a new coach, I said, look, you have to have a coach that you realize, and this kind of goes to your question. Mm-hmm. For that month the World Cup's going on, that coach is going to be the most scrutinized coach in sport in the United States, more than a Super Bowl coach.
Yeah.
We have to be prepared for that. Now, what is that going to do for soccer? It's going to set a tone financially and marketing-wise for the next generation.
Yeah.
We still have to share that stage with other sports. Mm-hmm. That's what it is in the United States. I don't want to, I've heard since the time I was 10 years old, and since the 1980s, soccer's the next sport to explode.
Yeah.
I've heard that my whole life. It's organic. It's gonna do it on its own. Mm-hmm. But until we realize that, we have to share it with these other stages. We're in other countries, they don't. But there's enough in the United States here.
Yeah.
The World Cup is going to push us to a whole, the things I saw in the 90s, in the mid to late 90s, we're going to see those after the World Cup. I'm convinced. And it's going to sustain our sport at a whole nother level for the next generation. Mm-hmm. And people need to be ready for that.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds good to me. Well, John, we're right at the end of our interview here. Thank you so much for being here, man. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you better and learn more about your story, and I'm sure our listeners feel the same way. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to let folks know about, or anything that you want to sort of share with our audience here before we let them go?
I think we went through a lot of history. I just a couple comments. What Andrew and his group are doing at Edgewater Castle, I kind of alluded to. I think in the community here, it's unprecedented in the city. So congrats on that. Just keep the work up. Community-based is where it starts. The grassroots, that's where we all started at, and hopefully finish that one day. Mm-hmm. And then I'd also say anyone in the LGBT community, or if you're a player or a coach or that wants to talk, just hit me up. Should I give my Insta?
Yeah, send them a DM. Why not?
Yeah, just send me a DM, J Dorn, DORN 14 at Insta, and I'll be happy anytime to talk and help you in whatever way you need.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John. Really appreciate it again. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Stone by Stone. Have a great rest of your day.
Ahoy there! Thank you for listening to Stone by Stone, an Edgewater Castle podcast. Be sure to listen to our next episode, or better yet, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, where you can find video versions of our episodes, Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere else you get your podcast fix. We'll have a lot of exciting new content coming up throughout the year, and we want you to stay along for the ride. In fact, you should probably just follow us on all social media platforms also. Just to be safe. And with that, I leave you be. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for supporting the club, listening to the podcast, and as per usual, go Rooks.